Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright, round yon virgin mother and child, holy infant, so tender and mild, sleep in heavenly peace, sleep in heavenly peace.
This is a story about Arnold Swenson. You may know someone named Arnold Swenson. I can assure you that this story is not about him. This story is about a different Arnold Swenson out in rural South Dakota where he farmed for a living. Arnold was sitting in his favorite chair alone in the living room, surfing channels on a brand new 54-inch television. This television was the family's main Christmas present for this year, and Arnold had just finished setting it up since tonight was Christmas Eve. The reason he was alone was because his family had all gone into town to go to church without him. Arnold didn't have much time for church, so he convinced his wife that setting up the new television while the family was away was the best way to spring the surprise. His wife had given him a hard stare over that one, but the family was used to going to church without him. Suddenly, Arnold heard a loud thump at the big picture window that looked out over the yard in front of the farmhouse. He got out of his chair and came over to check out what had caused it. He noticed a couple of things right away. The first alarmed him rather a lot. A bad blizzard had just starting to kick up outside. The thermometer attached outside the window revealed that the temperature had fallen to 0. The blowing snow had created an odd glow around the powerful yard light that stood on top of a post in the front yard. The look of that globe of light told him that this storm would be worrisome, especially with his family in town. The second thing he noticed was that there was something very unusual about the undulating globe of light in the front yard. There were black dots circling the light amidst the swirling snow. Birds. There was a flock of birds circling the light in his yard. Then, remembering the sound that had brought him to the window, he peered down into the snow. Sure enough, there in the drift beneath the snow was the form of a bird dazed and dying from its unexpected encounter with the glass. A moment later, Arnold found himself standing in total darkness. He had just finished running around turning off every light. He knew that the birds were attracted to the light and would be lured to their death by light in the living room. As he stood staring at the flock circling the light pole, he realized that they soon would all be dead of the cold in spite of his attempt to save them from the danger of his picture window. In that moment, something snapped inside of Arnold. It may have been his growing concern over the safe return of his family. It may have been simply the stress of life in rural South Dakota in these economic times. Whatever it was, it came in the form of a sudden, deep, almost agonizing compassion for the flock of birds. They were so lost. They were so foolish. They were so doomed because they were lost and foolish. In the back porch, he pulled on his cold weather overalls, boots, and hat and gloves. Then he went out to the barn and opened the big double doors that faced the yard. He turned on every light inside the barn. "This will bring them," he mumbled to himself. "If they will just roost in the rafters, they will be safe from the storm and alive in the morning." But his anxiety grew as the minutes passed. The entire flock continued to circle the yard light. Not a single bird broke away and headed for the safety of the barn. He considered turning off the yard light, but he knew that his family would need that beacon to find their way in from the country road. Finally, Arnold decided to take direct action. He found the long pole that they used for changing light bulbs. Extending it out to its full length, he went out into the wind again, carrying the pole like a pikeman with full determination. When he reached the yard light, he began to swing the pole wildly. He didn't want to harm any of the birds, but he thought he might just scare them to their senses, and they would see the light in the barn and fly to safety. Many more minutes passed. Arnold's exhaustion and frustration grew along with the awareness that the attempt to scare the birds into the barn was futile. But still, he kept trying with the pole. "If I could just get one of them into the barn, the others will follow. I know they will." Finally, the flaming pain in his arm muscles and the increasing numbness in his cold hands forced him to lay down the pole. It was not going to work. There were already 2 or 3 birds on the ground, black against the snow, dying in the cold. Experiencing frustration, anger, sorrow, and fear, in a startling mix of emotions, he cried out against the universe. He confronted God in his own habitation as he shouted, "Why? Why do they have to be so lost? Why do they have to die? Why can't they find their way to safety? If just one of them could lead the way, if I could just be a bird for a minute, I could lead them to safety." And in that moment, the sound of the storm faded from Arnold's ears, as if the storm had calmed, and the light brightened as his tears suddenly flowed. And in one of those rare moments of incredible clarity, Arnold stared directly into the open heart of God, and he knew why. He knew why God had come as Jesus. He came to lead us to safety. A few minutes later, his family found him kneeling in the snow amidst the dead and dying birds. He was crying, laughing, and talking about birds, and about being a bird, and about a baby in a manger down in the barn. I won't say that Arnold never missed church again, even though there was a big change in his faith. However, it was clear that he would never miss Christmas Eve worship again. Sometimes his family would find him standing and staring up at the yard light. If they could have understood the words he was saying under his breath, they would have heard what was now firmly underlined in his Bible. These were the words that told him why. "For God so loved the world, that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him."
Sleep in heavenly peace. Sleep.